Happy LFS Awareness Day, my friends. My name is Andy Last. I'm the president of Living LFS. We are headquartered in the United States, but I am based in South Australia, where it is currently 10:30 a.m. on Saturday, March 21st. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you what the lottery numbers are. Otherwise, I would. This meeting is being recorded, and the video will be posted to our public YouTube channel in the coming days. So if you want to participate, but you don't want to be in the recording that is being published publicly, please turn off your camera and microphone. You can go ahead and post any questions that you have in the chat, and we will make sure to do our best to get those answered for you. Now, there is a lot to cover in the next 2 hours, and we've got a lot of people on the call and a lot of stuff to go over. So I'm going to ask two things of you. Number one, please mute yourself while other people are speaking. Number two, please use the chat to post your questions during each speaker presentation. I will manage those to make sure that we can get as many answered as possible at the end of each presentation. So please don't raise your hand or interject while somebody is speaking. Let's save all those questions to the end because your questions might be answered as the speakers are speaking. So, as for the agenda today, Living LFS, the organization that is putting this LFS Awareness Day event on, our mission is to encourage, empower, and educate those living with Li-Fraumeni syndrome by connecting them with care, resources, and others who are living LFS. So today, we're going to do that by telling you about some of our international counterparts. And we're also going to get your questions about LFS and elephants answered. And if you don't know why elephants matter, you're going to want to stick around. So I've made a list of resources that will be in the call today. Let me see if there's a way that I can share that with you. I think probably the best way is for you to, if you are interested in receiving the list of all of the links to all of the resources that we're talking about today, all of the organizations that you're talking about today, put your name in the chat. I've got all of your email addresses. Put your name in the chat. I will make sure to send an email at the end of this call to everybody who is interested in that resource. So, our agenda for today, we're going to start with Pantziarka. He's the co-founder of the George Pantziarka TP53 Trust in the UK. He'll tell us about his organization. Then Sarah Powell, she's the CEO of Inherited Cancers Australia. She'll tell us what's happening with genetic cancer support here, where I am in Australia. And coming to us live from Salt Lake City, Utah, Dr. Joshua Schiffman, the man that I call the rock star of the LFS world. He'll answer your elephant and LFS questions, and I'll tell you more about him before he speaks. Following Dr. Schiffman, we will talk about our hardship grants successes today, and we'll recognize all of our generous donors, and we will wrap up by celebrating Living LFS founder Jennifer Mallory's birthday. She would have been 50 years old today. I would like to introduce Pantziarka from the TP53 Trust in the UK. Pan, thank you so much for being here at midnight your time. Really, really appreciate it. And can you please tell us about your organization and what kind of things you've got going in the world of LFS these days?
First off, thank you for asking me. And it's fine that it's midnight. It's great to see so many people online. We founded the George Pantziarka TP53 Trust after my son's passing in 2011. He had his third cancer diagnosis before we discovered he had Li-Fraumeni syndrome. And to be honest, I'd never heard of Li-Fraumeni syndrome before that. After he passed, we wanted to do something to remember him and make what had happened to him meaningful in some way. And we realized that there was nothing for people with Li-Fraumeni syndrome in the UK at the time. In fact, there was nothing anywhere. Living LFS and the LFSA didn't exist in the US either. We just had a few isolated contacts on Facebook, including Jennifer Mallory. And so we formed the organization to provide the support that we would have wanted when we discovered what LFS was. And the organization has continued to grow and expand since that time. We do a lot of support for people. So we get lots of questions for people who are newly diagnosed, and even from people who've been diagnosed for a long time, who've got a new situation that they deal with. Um, the other thing that we do, aside from support and awareness raising, is that we are very keen on supporting the science. And I work in oncology. Um, uh, so I've got a scientific background myself. Some of the things that we are doing, we have a clinical trial in the UK called the Millie trial, metformin in Li-Fraumeni syndrome, which is testing a drug called metformin, which is used to treat type 2 diabetes. And what we're doing is we're testing to see if this reduces cancer incidence in people with LFS. Now, there have been other studies done in mice, and there was a small study done in the US that showed that in people with LFS, metformin has effects in the body, in the cells. Um, but that was a very short intervention. And whereas what we're doing is a much longer trial to see, does it have an impact on cancer incidence? It's a randomized trial, so some people will get uh, randomly selected to take metformin. Some people will not get metformin. Both groups of people will be tracked and get whole body MRI and lots of other surveillance. And at the end of the trial, we'll be able to compare the two groups and see if there is a difference in cancer incidence. So people have been talking about metformin and LFS for a number of years, but this is the first trial that's actually running now. Um, there's also another trial in Germany, which is using the same kind of protocol. And what we hope to do at the end of our trial and the end of their trial is take all of the data, put it together, and see, with a bigger group of people whether there is a real effect. So for us, that's been a really important thing. We've worked on that for many years to get the funding and the approval and so on, with lots of roadblocks, but the trial is running. We've recruited around 50, 55 people so far, but we've got a few years to go. So um, we're very hopeful that shows something. And actually, even if the trial is negative, and it's a randomized trial, we have to be prepared that the outcome isn't what we hope. But even if the trial is negative, we would have ruled out a drug that doesn't work, which is very important. But we would also have proved that it's possible to run a clinical trial for a cancer prevention drug in people with LFS. And I think that's a really important precedent. But that's not the only study that we've got going on in the UK. There's a study called LIFS, which is Li-Fraumeni through time study. And that's taking blood samples and tissue samples across time. And so we want to do this throughout people's lives, whether they have an active cancer or not. We want to keep tracking what's going on in people's bodies while they're healthy with LFS, or if they're not healthy with LFS, because there's still so much that we really don't understand at molecular level about LFS. So that's an ongoing study as well. And we've got a few other things in the pipeline, but I can't say too much on those because they may or may not happen. But we are really keen on kind of moving the needle in LFS research beyond the kind of laboratory work that's been the focus for a long time, to actually doing stuff in people with LFS with interventions that we really hope will make a difference to people's lives rather than in the lives of uh, mice in the lab. So really important for us.
That is
Um,
fantastic news.
so so yeah, lots of stuff. But day to day, in the UK we have a lot of issues. The biggest issue for people is access to whole body MRI. That's our number one issue now. a few years ago, we funded a consensus statement meeting. Everybody agreed, oncologists, cancer genetics people, patient advocates, we all agreed that whole body MRI was the cornerstone of surveillance for people with LFS. There have been multiple clinical trials across the world. We've had 2 different trials in the UK. There's been a meta-analysis. Everybody knows that it's the right treatment. But despite the guidelines, it doesn't happen for a lot of people. It's in the UK, it really is an absolute lottery. Even in London, you can live in one part of London and you will get whole body MRI routinely once a year. You live across the street and you're in a different hospital authority and you don't. So for us, that's an ongoing battle. We've been trying to get the National Health Service to kind of follow through with its own guidelines, but it's a real struggle. So, that's also an important part of what we're doing, kind of trying to get the best care possible for people with LFS. So for us, that will be a huge victory when we can finally say everybody with LFS in the UK gets the best care and support that they need.
That is fantastic. It's so great to hear about the work that you're doing. I believe that you have an event coming up in May. Can we talk about that?
Not in May. In September, we've got our annual conference in London. All welcome. So if you're in London at the time, please drop by. We have a fantastic program. You'll hear from the latest science. All of the studies that I've just talked about will be reporting in September, but it's also an opportunity for people to meet other people in the LFS community. At these meetings, we have people from right across the UK, sometimes from outside of the UK as well. And for many people, it's the first time they actually meet somebody outside of their own family who's got LFS, and it's hugely emotional to do that. I mean, it's we can remember what it was like the first time we met other people who were going through the same thing. So a really big deal for us.
Fantastic. Yes. And I will say, for anybody that's on this call that you've just recently been diagnosed, you haven't had the experience of meeting somebody else that's got LFS other than your own family, you may not realize how meaningful it is to actually connect with others that are in the same boat. In theory, it sounds like, yeah, that would be important, but actually experiencing it, doing it in person is amazing. And it's really important. So if you are in the UK and you do have the opportunity to attend that event in London in September, I would really highly encourage you to do so. Again, I have a list of resources, including the website for the TP53 Trust in the UK. If you are interested in that, put your name in the chat. I will be sending it on email with all of those resources to everybody who puts their name in the chat. I see that nobody has asked any questions in the chat for Pan. Does anybody have any questions? If so, go ahead and turn on your camera, or you can put it in the chat. And I will ask it for you. But right now would be your opportunity. Do you have any questions for Pantziarka? Pan, am I pronouncing that correctly? How do you pronounce your last name?
No, that's pretty good. Have you been practicing in front of the mirror?
No, I have not.
No, Andy, I'd just like to echo what you said about one of my favorite parts of the family camp that we host every 2 years is asking people if they've ever met anybody with LFS before. And there's always 20 or 30 people who've never met another family member or a person that has LFS. And it's just an amazing few days that we do every 2 years. And we are doing a family camp this year. So I see some faces on the call here that I've met at family camp. I just highly recommend anybody, because it's really it's a pretty emotional and very impactful weekend together.
And And that information about our upcoming family camp is in the resource sheet that I will be emailing out if you are interested in it as well. So if you want to know about family camp, put your name in the chat as well. Pan, thank you again for taking the time today at this hour to join the call. At
No
the moment,
problem.
we have 29 people. There were over 60 that have registered. So a number of people will be watching this on YouTube. And it's really, really great I'm very appreciative of our partnership that we've had over all of these years. Thank you so much for supporting Living LFS. And we're very happy to do anything that we can to support the TP53 Trust as well.
Yeah, and I've just put my email address in the chat. So if anyone wants to drop me a line, even if it's just to say hello, please go ahead. Always happy to kind of make contact with people or answer questions about the trials or in the UK or anything else. So
fantastic.
I won't stay on for much longer, but thank you for having me and great to see so many people on. Yeah,
thank you, Ben.
Thank you very much,
Thanks, Greg.
Ben. The next person speaking is Sarah Powell. She is the CEO of Inherited Cancers Australia. Sarah, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us today on LFS Awareness Day. How are you? How are things where you are in Australia?
Thanks, Sandy. Yes, well, it's 11 a.m. in Australia, so definitely not like Pan, because, it's a more reasonable time anyway, let's put it that way. And apologies, I did jump on a bit late, but thanks, Pan. It was really great to hear all the work that you're doing, and thank you, Andy, for inviting me. I'm curious, is there anyone on the call that is from Australia? Are there any hands up?
There's me.
Yeah, well, that's right. Ah, amazing. I can see one, maybe. So to give everyone a little bit of a background, we reached out to Andy a couple of months ago, I think. So our organisation is called Inherited Cancers Australia, but we actually rebranded about 18 months ago, and we used to be called Pink Hope. So we were founded back in 2009 as an organisation predominantly focused on sort of BRCA mutations and breast and ovarian cancer risk. Because, if you think back to that time, that, they were well known, and that we knew a lot about that. And our founder felt that there wasn't any support for people trying to reduce their risk of cancer versus, people with cancer. There was a real gap. I took over the organisation about 6 years ago as the CEO, but I have lived experience. I have a BRCA1 mutation and had breast cancer when I was 29, so I was very involved in the organisation, and I'm very fortunate to get to lead it. But we made a big decision to change our name because there are many inherited cancer predispositions, and we wanted to be more inclusive to all different types of these different, inherited mutations, and also men. We felt that with the pink in our name, we were not really being inclusive to men, and also, it can not all men, but it can be a little bit off-putting, all the pink. So we rebranded, and as part of that, we wanted to make sure that we are doing what we can for all the different conditions, and LFS being one of those. So we started to look at what's out there. There's nothing else in Australia, but then there's Living LFS. So as an organisation, we are still, I suppose if we look at our website, still quite breast ovarian focused, and it's a big part of our strategy to really kind of widen that. But we also know there are great organisations like Living LFS that, do some amazing work. So it's not like we want to come in and take over that. We want to work how we can collaborate with these organisations. And we're a very small organisation. There's 6 of us, and most of us work part-time, although we're lucky because I know a lot of organisations like ours are volunteer-led as well. So, we are fortunate we have some funding. But I also feel that in the charity sector, I see a lot of duplication and, people sort of doing the same things. So for me, it's really important to work together as charities. We all have limited resources, limited capacity. So let's just give you a bit of a background. So we reached out to Andy, and the timing was quite good because we're, coming up to LFS Day. So Andy's asked me to have come on the call and have a chat. So I guess as an organisation, we support, educate and advocate for families with inherited cancer risk. And one of the things that, Pan just brought up then is the peer support, meeting people who are the same as you. It's so incredibly important. And that's why patient organisations exist, really. I think the key thing that we can do is connect people, because it's a powerful, it's emotional, but, talking to other families just like you. And I'm actually sitting here today, and we run info and support days. So that's kind of on our education side. And we're running one here in Melbourne, Australia today. And although we have panels of, clinicians and experts talking about the different aspects of inherited cancer risk, the feedback we get from the families that come is that one of the best things, they love about these days is connecting with other people, because there's, we have breaks and lunch breaks and tea breaks, all of that kind of thing. And, people build those connections and can feel a little bit less isolated or lonely by, sort of talking to other people. So yeah, that's us as an organisation. I can put our website into the chat if people want to have a look. Obviously, I know we're all, it's probably predominantly people here from the US, but if anyone's in Australia and wants to connect with us, please do. Like I said, we are in our very early stages of trying to kind of work out how we can support other types of inherited risk, like LFS, even things like Lynch syndrome. There's many different areas that I suppose that we need to increase our support, and we're sort of slowly working out how we do that without duplicating the great work that's already happening all over the world. Yeah,
well, and I will mention the fact that Inherited Cancers Australia was kind enough to make an informational post about LFS on LFS Awareness Day, which here was yesterday. Now it's the day after LFS Awareness Day, so thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for the budding partnership. It's great to have that kind of starting to make those connections so that we can make sure that we're all supporting as many people as we can across the world that are dealing with inherited cancers. Absolutely, yeah. I love these connections and the collaborations. I think it's really nice way to work. Particularly, as I said, in the charity sector where we're all under-resourced and overworked. So, yeah, absolutely. You, all right. If you do have any questions for Sarah, go ahead and put them in the chat. If you don't want to be on camera or on microphone, or if you have any questions and you do want to be in the recording, go ahead and speak up now. Or forever hold your peace. I'm kidding. As I mentioned, this will be recorded and posted to YouTube. So if you have, anybody that would like to watch this after the fact, more than happy to send that to everybody as well. All right. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining today, taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know you've got a lot going on today, and for telling us about Inherited Cancers Australia. And I see that you have also put the link to your website into the chat as well. If anybody would like to find out more information, you can go there. And like I said, I will also send out that information resource sheet for anybody who wants it. Thanks, Andy, and thanks, everyone. And yeah, I won't be able to stay on for too much longer because it's kind of in the middle of an event, but really appreciate the time you've taken today. So thank you. Lovely. Thank you so much, Sarah. All right, next up, Dr. Joshua Schiffman. I'm so happy that the rock star of LFS has agreed to join us today. He is a professor of pediatrics in the Division of Pediatric Hematology and Oncology at the University of Utah. He is an investigator at the Huntsman Cancer Institute at the University of Utah, where he runs a translational research laboratory focused on hereditary cancer risk and comparative oncology. He has served as CEO of Peel Therapeutics since co-founding the company in 2015. It's a biotech introducing evolution-based medicines for cancer. Dr. Schiffman's clinical efforts focus on pediatric cancer genetics, including Li-Fraumeni syndrome. Dr. Schiffman, thank you so much for making yourself available to the LFS community and Living LFS on LFS Awareness Day today. Thank you.
Wonderful. Now, I have a question for the group. I prepared a talk. I love to talk. I love to talk about elephants. I love to talk about p53. I love to talk about LFS, my favorite subject, how we're going to help everyone around the world. Tell me, in terms of timing, what would be good? I can show a few slides. I can give a whole lecture. I can give an update. I can talk about the elephants. I want to answer questions. Andy, tell me, or the group.
Okay, so I've basically allotted about an hour for you to speak, answer questions. We have, I think there's about 6 questions that have already been submitted. Some of those are from people who have not been able to join the call. So I would like to make sure that at the very least we get those questions answered. So do you want to share some slides and then we can get to questions?
Yeah, and there may be a few more questions that come in as I go through. It is an honor to be here. I love all the little floating thumbs. First and foremost, I'm not a rock star. Let me be clear. There are many other rock stars in the LFS world. If anything, we're a band and we all work together. but just want to get that out there. So some of you I have met before, some of you I've never seen before, and I'm looking forward to the conversation over the next hour. So who am I? So this is me. I'm Dr. Josh Schiffman. I always want to share with the LFS community that I actually had cancer myself when I was 15. So I understand what it's like to have cancer. I don't have Li-Fraumeni syndrome, but I did grow up to become a pediatric oncologist and became very interested early on about who's getting cancer and why, and met several patients with Li-Fraumeni syndrome, got to know Dr. David Malkin, who helped discover the p53 gene was involved in Li-Fraumeni syndrome, and really, truly have spent the last 20 plus years focused on Li-Fraumeni syndrome, p53, and how can we make a difference for our patients. So what I'll do is try to limit to about 20 minutes, might go a little bit longer, and we'll make sure we'll answer questions, but I want to give a brief update on where we are with Li-Fraumeni syndrome and how it relates to patients. And then I'm going to talk a bit about elephants and biotech and some hope that may be coming everyone's way, and then certainly leave time for questions. So please feel free to interrupt. You can just come off of mute and ask me questions as we go along, or you can save them to the end. And of course, those who know me know I'm always available by phone or text or email if you have any questions that come up, or if I can be of any assistance to you or your family. So always important to start with disclosure statements. I am the co-founder of this company called Peel. Peel turns out to be the Hebrew word for elephant. And the other disclosure statement is that I am a lover of all things elephant. And if I do my job right in the next 15 to 20 minutes, you too, if you're not already, will be a lover of elephants. It's really important, obviously, to think about the patients. And you know this, you are patients, you are family members. And I always begin by just reflecting back to children that I've met with Li-Fraumeni syndrome. One of the first teenage Li-Fraumeni workshop held, again, many years ago, now was in Utah, and we brought some of the children to the zoo. One of the things that's most rewarding for me is to bring patients to the lab so you can actually see the science that we're doing and getting ready, hopefully, to translate into people. And unfortunately, Li-Fraumeni does lead to patients developing cancer, and those cancers, unfortunately, do sometimes claim the lives of our patients. So I always remember two patients that were at this event, Addie and Henning, and unfortunately passed away from Li-Fraumeni syndrome-related cancer. But again, they always inspire me, and I always mention them, and there are many others that I've met along the way. So you know all of this personally, but just so to level set, and we're all on the same playing field here, is that Li-Fraumeni syndrome is really an early onset of bone soft tissue tumors. Now, we sometimes say it's 100% risk, and you hear that, 100% risk of developing cancer. That's probably a little bit higher. It's probably not exactly 100%, maybe closer to 80 to 90%. And those numbers are based on the fact that when we started to see patients with Li-Fraumeni syndrome, we were seeing those patients with cancer. So there was a bit of a bias there. But the risk is very high. And of course, as you know, you can develop multiple cancers throughout your lifetime if you do have Li-Fraumeni syndrome. And of course, this is due to that p53 gene. Now, p53 gene has been called the guardian of the genome and has many important jobs. One of the most important jobs, obviously, is to protect us from cancer. Usually, people have two working copies of the Li-Fraumeni gene, the p53 gene, and you need both those copies in order to protect from cancer. Even so, half of all men and a third of all women will still develop cancer, even if they don't have Li-Fraumeni syndrome throughout their lifetime. So cancer definitely happens. But if you only have one working copy, then the risk becomes much higher. It seems you need the two copies working together to really prevent those cells from turning into cancer. And when I'm talking to families, especially with children, I always say, when I think of Li-Fraumeni and I think of p53, the guardian of the genome, I think of a big p53 gene with a superhero and tight red underpants and a cape with a big p53 on its chest, protecting us from getting cancer. And again, if you only have one copy, the risk for cancer is much higher. Now, we used to have definitions. I'm not going to go into too many details here, but we used to have very strict definitions of how do you define Li-Fraumeni syndrome? What are the criteria? And you had to be of a certain age, and you had to have one cancer and a second degree relative with cancer, and you had to have a specific type of cancers, and you could have from category A, category B. Now, we haven't thrown it out the window. We still use this as a guide, but really, if there is multiple cancers in a family, and it tracks through the same line in that family, on the mother's side or the father's side, or if there are specific cancers, then we begin to think more about Li-Fraumeni syndrome. But we don't clinically use the Champray criteria as much. It's still used in research, but it's probably overly strict. Now, the question always comes up, how common is this? How many people, is this rare? Some people, as Andy was saying, you never hear of this, and Greg was mentioning, you never hear of this until you're diagnosed with it. It's probably more common than we realize. It's just we haven't looked for it before. And the estimates really range. Now, in Brazil, we know that there's a very specific type of Li-Fraumeni related mutation, a p53 variant. And that in some areas of Brazil is as common as 1 in 300. 1 in 300, that's pretty common. Other estimates out of the UK, it's closer to 1 in 10,000. If I had to guess, it's probably closer to 1 in 2,000, between 1 in 2,000 and 1 in 3,000, which is rare, but it's not unheard of. So there are probably many more people than we recognize with Li-Fraumeni syndrome. And perhaps they're not all getting cancers, and that's why I say that 100% lifetime risk may be a little bit lower. All right, hopefully everyone's still with me. Yes? Okay. Now, as you know, with Li-Fraumeni syndrome, you can get many different types of cancers, and we're going to talk more about the timing of these cancers. Many of you have hopefully heard of something called the Toronto Screening Protocol or the Surveillance Protocol. And I'm very proud that our group in Utah worked with Dr. Malkin and was involved in some of these early studies that Dr. Malkin led out of Toronto. And again, I keep mentioning the name David Malkin. He is the true rock star. He is not just the rock star, he is the whole Rock and Roll Hall of Fame of Li-Fraumeni syndrome. But he worked very hard to push this protocol forward, and we were able to help with that. And one of our first studies, we showed that patients who underwent this screening protocol, there was 100% survival, and those patients who decided not to get screened with Li-Fraumeni syndrome only had 20% survival. Now, this was published, again, 15 plus years ago. And so this was one of the first studies to come out and say, you know what, screening actually makes a difference. If we can find cancers early, we can save lives. We actually went back and repeated this study several years later, and what we found was that still held up. Now, in fact, more patients were actually were detecting cancers early, so the survival was really 90%, if you could say, versus 60%. But still, that's a 30% increase in lives saved. So we do strongly recommend the screening protocol. Now, the biggest issue, we heard about this early, is access. So not all patients in all countries have access to the screening protocol. But I'd like to show this slide to point out that these are patients that were in Utah who underwent this screening protocol. We definitely find cancers that patients don't even know they have. And so maybe during the Q&A, we can talk more about this. Maybe some of you have experienced this. The earlier you find a cancer, the better, right? Because cancers spread, and you want to try to find it before it spreads, and these screening protocols are a way to do that. And in fact, there's been several updates and several groups that have shown over and over again that screening does actually work. So much so that now we have specific recommendations for how to screen patients with Li-Fraumeni syndrome. And again, I'm going to go through these quickly. We can come back and talk about them if there's specific questions related to them. But here's what we recommend for children up to the age of 18 who we know have Li-Fraumeni syndrome. First of all, a physical exam is the most important thing. We want to make sure that we can actually examine the patient and there's no lumps or bumps or anything unusual. But we do these whole body MRI screens from head to toe. We focus on the brain. We want to make sure that there are no brain tumors, and if there are, we can find them early. We look in the blood for leukemia. Now, this recommends every 3 to 4 months in practice, and you guys are patients, so you know it's not always that feasible to get to the clinic every 3 months with a newborn, but this is what's recommended. We look for ultrasounds for any abdominal tumors, we do skin evaluations, and then as patients approach 18, we screen for breast cancer. Now, that's children. Adults, I don't see any children on the line here, but for adults with screening with Li-Fraumeni syndrome, it's similar, except some of the tumors are a little bit less common. So again, we do physical exam, try to do that every 6 months. Breast cancer screening, MRI and mammography. Now for these sarcomas, we do the whole body MRI screening. Again, we look at the brain, so it's very similar. The ultrasound, we back off every 6 months. Skin screening, prostate screening once you reach the age of 35. GI cancer, so my colleagues in the world of Li-Fraumeni are showing that colorectal cancer is some types of colorectal cancer are happening more commonly, so we do recommend screening every 2 to 5 years. And based on what the GI doctor sees on the screening, you can recommend to do it more frequently. And then again, we've got this leukemia screening. And in practice, this is not done that often, but it is the recommendation. So it is fairly intensive, and we're going to come back to that because as an oncologist, as a doctor who takes care of patients with Li-Fraumeni syndrome, we want patients to live a normal life. And so we want to try to figure out, and you're going to hear now, the big push in the research is how can we identify who really needs a screen every 3 months for blood work and who maybe we can do every 5 years, or maybe we can start when they're 25 instead of when they're 6 years old. And that's really the research focus these days. And as you can see, these letters stand for different types of tumors, like choroid plexus tumor, which is a brain tumor, or adrenal corticocarcinoma, or these rhabdomyosarcomas. There are very specific tumors that occur in different ages in patients with Li-Fraumeni syndrome. And so we take that into account when we're thinking about what's the screening going to be. Now, let me walk you through this very colorful graph, which is basically showing you what types of cancers do people with Li-Fraumeni syndrome develop, but what's the timeline for them? So not just that, oh, patients with Li-Fraumeni syndrome get breast cancer, but you can see that happens usually, the breast cancer here, this is for females in this purple color, is, after the age of 25 and then by 30, and it really increases throughout your lifetime, almost approaching 60%. Okay, but you can see it's really in this time frame here between 25 to 50 to 60, and that's when we really are thinking a lot about screening for breast cancer. And then there are the sarcomas, steadily increase, and then many of the other cancers are definitely a higher risk, but later on in life. When we look at men, brain tumors seem to increase as we get older. These soft tissue sarcomas, especially in males at a younger age, and then they increase as we get older. And then osteosarcoma, which is a bone tumor, seems to increase after you reach the age of 10 and goes up. And then after the age of about 40, we tend not to see as much anymore. So again, it's not just, oh, you have Li-Fraumeni syndrome, you're at increased risk for cancer. It's what cancers and at what age, because that helps us as doctors think about the best screening for the patients. What I'll do now is I'll show you just a few examples of some of the most recent studies that have come out to really try to drill into this question. And this is really the big, big focus. How do we understand, based on an individual patient's specific mutation, specific change in letters in that p53 gene, what is their risk for cancer? And this is work done by my esteemed colleague, he is a unquestionable rock star, Dr. Christian Kratz in the field of Li-Fraumeni syndrome. He actually helped provide me with some of these slides, so he also gets rock star status just for that. But Christian has worked hard to really introduce this concept of the Li-Fraumeni spectrum. And you can think about where you fall on this spectrum, because there are certainly patients and families who very much have Li-Fraumeni syndrome. There's no question it's that Champre criteria. It's very severe. They've got families with bone tumors and brain tumors and sarcomas and breast cancers and multiple types of cancers, even in the same patient, there's no question. Those patients have the more severe Li-Fraumeni syndrome. But then there are patients who had the p53 mutation, but we're not seeing quite as many cancers as you would expect, right? So we call those attenuated. And then there are some patients where we just pick up the Li-Fraumeni syndrome, the fact they have that, the p53 mutation, on a screening for some reason, but they've never had any cancers. And then there are some patients who've never, actually they don't have Li-Fraumeni syndrome, but only a few cells in their body have p53. So again, we're now, as we're moving forward in the field of Li-Fraumeni syndrome, we're trying to understand more about what does it mean to actually have Li-Fraumeni syndrome. And now I'll show you what do we do with that information. So again, work led by Dr. Malkin and his group, but we always work together, all of us in the field, is trying to understand what contributes to that risk of cancer. And what they were able to show, and I won't go through now all of the details here, but doing very fancy, very sophisticated genomic analysis and sequencing and looking at the patients who developed cancers and at what age did they develop cancers, what type of cancers, and what are the mutations in their whole genome, they were able to show that the patients who developed cancer, the highest risk of developing cancer, actually had other genes in their genome. So other genes, so we remember we have 20,000 different genes, p53 is one of them, but there are other cancer-related genes, and patients who had some type of change, variant mutation in their other cancer genes, that combination seemed to increase their risk. And there were actually even certain genes that had different changes, something called hypermethylation or epimutations, which seemed to increase the risk. But then there were other mutations that we were able to show that there was much lower risk of cancer that went along with that. So again, we're beginning to be a little bit more sophisticated and say, no, it's not just p53 you're going to have cancer. It's you have p53, but what other genes do you have that might be increasing your risk? Okay. So then another study came out, and again, here we see Christian Kratz, we see David Malkin, Kara Maxwell. Christian and Kara really are very focused and lead some of the we call the LIFE Consortium, Li-Fraumeni Exploration Group, and we're able to show that you can actually further cluster and stratify which patients are going to get even which types of cancer and which have the highest risk. So here I want to make a point that we as scientists are always asking for your blood, right? We are like vampires, and you guys are wonderful. I know the LFS family camp that my colleagues have come and collected blood there. And what happens to all of that blood that's always getting collected? And some of you have given skin samples. What goes on with all of that? So it leads to research like this. So this paper started out with a very large group of patients with Li-Fraumeni syndrome that were entered into a public database, a discovery cohort, over 3,300 different patients, and then a validation cohort to make sure what they discovered was actually real. And they were able to actually narrow things down and find out again that the p53 mutation, it depends what type of mutation it is, and you can predict what is the risk of developing cancer. So remember I told you Christian Kratz had worked on different types of the Li-Fraumeni spectrum. Here we're able to actually then figure out, based on the variants, based on the p53 mutations, where do you fall in that spectrum? So hopefully you guys are seeing this all coming together. Yes? No? Maybe? I see some heads nodding with your camera on. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So then just one of the last studies is, again, same idea. Also led by Dr. Malkin's group. and our colleagues looking, and we can see there's something called methylation. You can think of it almost like the on-off switch for whether a gene turns on, no matter what gene that is. And they were able to look and see and actually predict a high probability that if you have this specific pattern of the on-off switch on different genes and so forth, that you were able to actually predict a high probability that at a very young age, you are going to get cancer, right? 91% accuracy, 90% of patients with cancer before the age of 6, but almost 90% that did not. So now so many of you may have children, and again, it's a hassle. It's tough. We need to do the screening, but now maybe we can start to think if there's a 90% chance, just imagine if there's a 90% chance that your child doesn't have cancer before the age of 6, maybe we can start to wait to screen. And isn't that exciting? Okay, so we're not there yet, but this is very much where we're going, and with my colleagues leading this research. Now, we do have a trial called Edison. Brian Crompton is helping lead this with some of these other investigators. And what we're doing with that is we're trying to take blood samples to predict, and you heard a little bit about this earlier, to predict who can get cancer and can we detect cancer early, right? Because, wow, what if we could use a blood test instead of having to do that whole scanner? And this is now ongoing. Okay. Elephants. Elephants rarely get, thank you for all the thumbs up. All right, elephants rarely get cancer. This is absolutely amazing. Some of you have heard me talk about this before. Why is this so amazing? Elephants are 100 times the size of people. That means they have 100 times as many cells. Every time a cell divides, whether you have Li-Fraumeni syndrome or not, every time a cell divides, it's a chance for that cell to turn into cancer. So if you have 100 times as many cells, that's 100 times as many chances to get cancer. But what would happen if elephants got cancer, right? So a baby elephant is born after 22 months of being pregnant, 22 months of gestation. Something my wife says wouldn't be a good thing to be pregnant 22 months in a row. And those baby elephants come out at 300 pounds. Also something my wife says wouldn't be a good thing, 300-pound elephant, a baby. And they go from 300 pounds to over 10,000 pounds in less than 10 years before they reach the age of reproduction. That means they're putting on 3 pounds a day of cells growing and dividing. Just by chance alone, all these baby elephants should be dropping dead of cancer before they could have their own baby elephants. But then what would happen? They would all go extinct because they'd be dead before they can have more baby elephants. And I'm here on this Living LFS Community Day to tell you that extinction is not a good strategy for survival, right? So what did the elephants do? The elephants, over millions and millions of years, figured out a way to avoid cancer by actually increasing their p53 genes. So we, as people, usually have 2 copies of p53 that work. 2 p53 genes. With Li-Fraumeni syndrome, you have 1. Elephants, instead of 2 copies, have 40. 40 copies, 20 times as much p53. Now, not all the p53 genes are the same, but some of them actually do work. And the p53 genes they do have work better than human p53. So I am going to save this for another time because it's much better late night over a drink or two to get really into the story. Some of you have heard this before. It involves a trip to the Hogle Zoo with my family, the Utah Zoo. It involves approaching the elephant keeper, Eric the elephant keeper, to try to get elephant blood. It involves the Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus. It involves the cover of Newsweek. It involves JAMA. Very, very exciting. The most exciting thing I've done in my career. And this was about 10 years ago. And we really figured out, how is that elephant p53 working? And there are different copies. And again, I'm not going to go into all of this right now because I definitely want to have time for the questions. But what I'll tell you is that we actually compared elephant blood to Li-Fraumeni blood, right? Again, I can't emphasize enough how grateful I am to all of our patients with Li-Fraumeni syndrome who participate in our research and make all this possible, right? We're doing it for you, but we need to do it with you, and it's just amazing. And so what we were able to show is that if you take an elephant cell in a dish from a real live elephant and you put radiation on this, not on the elephant, but on the cells in the dish, those cells all die very quickly because that extra p53 kills those cells, so no pre-cancer cell can go on to develop cancer. But if you take a cell from a patient with Li-Fraumeni syndrome and you give it radiation, it just keeps dividing and eventually turns into cancer. So it's very interesting. The elephants have figured out with their extra p53 how to avoid cancer. And what this shows is you can give a human cancer cell, you can make a human cancer cell basically die by giving an elephant p53. And the more p53 you give it, the higher the amount of cell death. And so we are able to show that human cells with elephant p53 in them die much faster than if you give them human p53, and that's going to be important in just 2 minutes when we talk about therapies. But what I want now is for people to grab their popcorn. Now, if you're in Australia, maybe early in the morning for popcorn, so you can grab your Cheerios or whatever you'd like, but I'm going to show you a couple of movies. And in these movies, these are cancer cells. This is a rare cancer called Ewing sarcoma. Actually, it doesn't happen very much in Li-Fraumeni syndrome, occasionally. But this tumor is missing p53. Now, what you're going to see over here on the left side of your screen is a cell that gets transfected, or we put in a color, but we don't put in anything else. So it's still missing p53. Here on this side, we put in the p53 gene. So wherever you see red here, it's that p53 gene turning on. Now you can see both of these are two separate dishes. Okay? Now, they have about the same number of cells. These are cancer cells. But the only difference is the one on the right has elephant p53 that has been put inside. So watch what happens over 24 to 48 hours. These other cells are dividing and growing and spreading just like they do in the patient's body, and these cells are shriveling up and dying. So by the time you reach 48 hours, every single cell in that dish is dead that had the elephant p53. That's pretty impressive. Now here we're looking at pancreatic cancer. Now, if we think about pancreatic cancer, and patients do I've had patients with Li-Fraumeni syndrome who get pancreatic cancer. Here is a control cell. So again, this one is missing p53, but these cells have actually two types of the elephant p53 put in, and watch what happens to these cells in the dish. They explode. It's like the Death Star exploding, right? The cells, they just disappear. And that's how powerful the elephant p53 is. And in fact, here I'm going to show you a prostate cancer cell. Now, this prostate cancer cell is growing in chemotherapy. So chemo doesn't kill the cell. And this prostate cancer cell is missing the p53 gene. And Dr. Maxwell and others have shown prostate cancer is part of the p53 Li-Fraumeni spectrum. So what happens to this cell? It's resistant to regular chemotherapy. You put in the elephant p53, and boom, that cancer cell is no more, right? It just turns into little pieces. And all those little pieces, by the way, can trigger an immune response, we would think, inside the patient to help make it even more powerful. Now, this is where we start thinking about patients. So I don't know if any of you have had the drug doxorubicin. It's very toxic. We have to get, doxorubicin. As an oncologist, you understand, we have to give you poisons. We don't like it, but we have to poison. We try to poison the tumor. We try to poison the tumor more than the patient, right? That's the way it works. Now we're getting more sophisticated and we've got precision-guided therapy, but we still use doxorubicin quite a bit. In fact, sometimes we call it the red devil, right? That's okay. That's because it's such a strong medication. Now here we see in a dish what happens. This is how many of the cells are dying. So this is a tumor called leiomyosarcoma, definitely part of patients with Li-Fraumeni syndrome, right? Some of the first patients with Li-Fraumeni syndrome decades and decades ago were described to have leiomyosarcoma. Now here we treat these cells in a dish from a patient with doxorubicin. And what happens? Well, the cells die a little bit, but we're using low-dose doxorubicin, okay? Now we give the elephant p53, and look at this, more cells die. What happens when we combine the two? Look at that difference. Look how many of these cancer cells are dying when you combine the elephant p53 with a small and hopefully safer dose of doxorubicin. So what does that mean? It means, how in the hell can we get this elephant p53 into patients, right? Greg, you've heard me talk about this for years and years and years, and I'm going to show you how we're doing this. Because think about it. If we could get just a little bit of elephant p53 in, we can back off maybe on some of the other chemotherapy that has a lot of side effects and potentially could lead to risk for other tumors. So here's what we've done. These are just lots of fancy science graphs, but they're showing you the elephant p53. We can put it in something called a lipid nanoparticle. We could deliver it in a dish. We can try it in mice as well. And here we see again, over and over again, elephant p53 kills more cancer cells than human p53. And even when you kill cells with human p53, the cells grow back, but the elephant p53, whoosh, they stay gone. That's very cool, right? That should give you hope that this elephant p53 is very good at killing cancer. And this may be a little bit fancy because it's getting late in the hour, but we were able to figure out which part of the elephant p53 makes it work better than the human p53. You see how this is higher, right, than the human? So we've made now, we're like Frankenstein p53. We patched together elephant parts and human parts, and we put them together. We mix them and match them, and we're able to turn human p53 to work as good as elephant p53. And we know it works because when you try to make an elephant p53 like a human p53, it doesn't work as well. So why is that important? Because we can begin to understand how's elephant p53 working better than human p53, and are there drugs in there that we can give to patients to really help either prevent cancer or at first treat cancer. And that is what we're working on. We have mice. We're about to finish, so don't worry, and then we'll get to all the questions. We have mice that we've actually taken out their mouse p53, and we've put in elephant p53. So these are mice. All of their p53, their two p53 genes, are actually elephant p53, not mouse p53. And then fortunately, we give the mice cancer, but what we're able to see is if the mice have the elephant p53 gene, they get less cancer. And when they get cancer, the cancer is smaller. And here is where it's super interesting. If you look how long the mice live, if you have two copies of a mouse p53 gene, a lab mouse, they live about 800 days, 900 days, 2 to 3 years, right? 3 years is really old for a laboratory mouse. You can see here in dark blue, what this means is there aren't very many mice left. But there are almost 40% of the mice still going strong at 800 days. That's incredible. Now, here's what you should be wondering. What about a Li-Fraumeni mouse? What happens to a mouse that only has one copy of mouse p53 versus, so that would be a mouse with Li-Fraumeni syndrome, versus a mouse with only one copy of elephant p53. It's not really an elephant with Li-Fraumeni, but it's a mouse with Li-Fraumeni with one working copy of elephant p53. Does all this make sense to you? Is everyone still awake?
Yes.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you, Andy. Okay, well, here it is. If you have no p53 gene and you're a mouse, you're in trouble. You're pretty much all dead before a year. If you're a mouse and you have Li-Fraumeni syndrome, it's very unlikely, if you're a mouse with Li-Fraumeni, that you will live past 600 days. And this is a lot of mice. Each of these little notches is a mouse that dies. But if you're a mouse and you have elephant p53, you're a mouse with Li-Fraumeni, but your p53 is elephant p53, 60% still alive when all the other mice are dead. Now, I'm a doctor that takes care of human patients, so I care much more about humans than mice. Don't tell all the mice that. But this is really very cool, right? So what does that mean for Li-Fraumeni patients? Still trying to figure it out. But it's very interesting, right? It's very hopeful. It means that evolution figured out a way to make p53 work even better in some animals. And here's your evidence, right? And so we have a company, it's called Peel Therapeutics. We're working on trying to figure out how to make this a medicine. We're working very closely with the academic lab at Huntsman Cancer Institute to where all these experiments were done. And we're thinking, how do we turn these discoveries to help patients? And so that is my talk, and we'll get to all of the questions. To summarize, we keep learning more about p53. We're focusing on with Dr. Malkin's group and Dr. Kratz and Dr. Maxwell, and everybody in the p53 community. How can we figure out who's going to get which cancer when so that we can really identify early and personalize our screening? And for elephants, hey, it is great to have this elephant p53, and we're trying to figure out how do we use that information to help our patients eventually with Li-Fraumeni syndrome. We're not there yet, but that's what we're thinking about. So most importantly, thank you, Living LFS. Thank you for Christian and Anita for letting me use some of their slides, and David Malkin I mentioned, and all of my wonderful, wonderful colleagues and all of the lab members. It's just a privilege, an honor. Is the most important thing I do is interacting with patients and doing this research, trying to make a difference, not just for the elephants, certainly, but for all of you, the patients. So that is my talk, and now let's get into questions.
Dr. Joshua Schiffman, thank you so much for this great presentation and the hope that you have provided. I'm going to leave my camera off so that people don't get the glitchy freak out from my camera. But I do have some questions that I'm going to go through from people who submitted them in advance, and then we'll get to the questions from the people who are on the call. So the first question is, I read that bone marrow transplant or CAR T cell could reset this gene mutation at some level. Is that true?
Okay, so we've got to separate. So the answer is yes and no. Okay, we've got to separate the answers, the question. So bone marrow transplant is different than CAR T therapy. Bone marrow transplant is we actually replace the bone marrow in the patient. That's often done for hematological, like malignancies, like leukemias. All right, sometimes for solid tumors. But what that does is it takes the bone marrow from a different patient, and basically all of the blood in your body comes from that other patient or other person. So if that other person doesn't have Li-Fraumeni syndrome, then your red blood cells, your immune cells, your platelets, they would not have that p53 mutation. So that means the risk of developing blood cancers might be lower, but all of the other cells in your body, like your breast cells or your muscle cells, where breast cancer or sarcoma, or your bone cells, they would still have the p53 gene. So bone marrow transplant is definitely not a treatment for Li-Fraumeni syndrome. It may be a treatment for cancers that develop in the blood, but it won't get rid of Li-Fraumeni syndrome. Now, CAR T cell, that's a little bit different. CAR T cell is not a way to treat Li-Fraumeni syndrome. That's more of a treatment for specific. That's what we call immunotherapy, which is really catching on quite a bit. And so you can train your immune cells to actually target cancer cells, but that doesn't get rid of Li-Fraumeni syndrome. That may be a treatment, though, for some cancers that are caused, if that makes sense, cancers that are caused by Li-Fraumeni syndrome. So that's the answer to that question.
Thank you very much for that. Next questions. It's a 2-for-1 here. Omega balance oil at the recommended dosage, is that of any harm with a TP53 mutation? And glutathione recommended dosage, is that okay to take when having the mutation? Been researching and reading clinical studies, but can't really come to a conclusion.
Yeah, that's because there isn't really a conclusion. So here's what I'll say, and I recognize some names of patients who I've seen before, is we don't have a silver bullet yet for preventing cancer. Metformin study is interesting. We'll see how it plays out. But what we know is that healthy lifestyle is the best thing to avoid cancer. Exercise, resistance training. Actually, we're learning more and more that lifting weights and push-ups, things like that, is good for your immune system, and that's helpful for preventing cancer. Aerobic exercise. We used to talk about eating, 5 to 8 fruits and vegetables a day. I still think that's a good idea. It's very hard to eat that many fruits and vegetables a day. It's much easier to put them in a smoothie. But not smoking, not drinking, those are your best bets. When it comes to, these things like omega and fish oil, right? Omega-3s in the fish oil, there's not a lot of data out there that says this is going to change the game in preventing cancer. There's some hints. A little bit of moderation could be fine. It's unclear. It's better to eat more fish. I get fish without mercury in it. That would probably be more beneficial. Omega-3 probably won't hurt you. Maybe there's a small benefit, but it's not a huge benefit. Glutathione, that's an antioxidant. There are some studies that suggest that will actually be protective to cancer cells if they're developing. So if you have an early cancer and you're taking glutathione, it might give that cancer an advantage. That's kind of theoretical. And so we say, maybe at neutral levels, it could be okay. So in other words, if you want to take omega-3 and you want to take glutathione, it probably won't hurt you, but don't take mega doses.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Next question is Mounjaro and related treatments for weight loss. There is evidence to suggest that some mice exposed to Mounjaro developed thyroid cancer. Being overweight is also a cancer risk. Is accessing treatments such as Mounjaro for weight loss a hard no for someone with LFS?
These are great questions. Great question. It's not a hard no, because you always, when we make medical decisions, we have to balance the patient and the patient's life and quality of life and risks. If you are a patient, or let's not call a patient, if you're a person, enough of this patient talk, right? If you're a person, if you're a person who has Li-Fraumeni syndrome, and you also happen to be morbidly obese, your risk for cancer from obesity is much higher than your risk for thyroid cancer from taking a GLP-1 agonist, which is more theoretical and based on mice. So if you need a GLP-1 to be healthy, then a GLP-1 agonist, then you should take it, like Mounjaro. You should take it because it's going to benefit you. But if you don't need it, then it's probably better to hold off on it if you can, right? So if you have mild weight issue, and you can diet and exercise, that's probably less of a risk, and actually there's a benefit to that. If you're diabetic, though, or pre-diabetic, there's probably an advantage, right? We don't want you to be diabetic and have all the risks that come along with that, and that may also increase cancer risk in some way as well. So if you could avoid it because your weight is okay and reasonable, and you don't have diabetes, you don't need it, I wouldn't recommend taking it. So that's why it's not a hard no. It's definitely not a hard no. There's a benefit, but we just have to be aware of the risks. The risks are mild or low, right? And here it's more in mice, but it's not zero. And we may learn eventually there could be benefits as well. But right now, there's not enough convincing data, in my opinion, to say that you should or shouldn't take Mounjaro. Better probably not to if you don't need it, but if you need it, it's worth it.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I had two other questions that came in this morning for me that I did not get a chance to convey to you. So these are going to put you in the hot seat a little bit.
I love it.
Are there any studies looking into the difference between the TP53 mutation and a TP53 mutation that is a deletion?
Oh, yes. There are some studies, and I'm trying to remember. I don't remember off the top of my head the difference between them. The deletions, it depends where they are and how they arise. There are some deletions that happen because there's actually what's called an inversion, and part of the gene flips around, and then it knocks off a very important part of the p53 gene. So it's so yeah, there are some differences, but the deletions are much rarer. And again, what we're trying to figure out is each deletion in each region versus a mutation in that region. What is the clinical significance? So it's going to vary a bit. So I don't want to go out on a limb and say deletions are always less severe or more severe. It really depends where the deletion is and how it impacts that gene. There's some p53 gene mutations, or we call them variants, that actually overactivate the p53 gene or turn it on and it blocks the other. So each gene and each mutation has a very different effect. And so it matters, where is that mutation, where is that deletion, to actually say what's better and what's worse.
Okay, I'm not going to put you on the hot seat for this, but I will just convey the fact that the person that asked the question is missing exons 3 through 11, and I actually have a large deletion as well. I'm missing exons 1 through 9.
Okay. Yes. Well, depending on so a mutation, again, it's very specific.
Yep.
So deletions can be large and could cut out all of those exons. And if they do that, then none of the p53 gene is functioning. If it's a mutation, depending on where the mutation is, you get something called hypomorph, which is sort of like a p53 gene, but doesn't work as well. It depends where those exons are and which ones. So it's very much dependent on the individual deletion or mutation.
Yep. This is the final question that was asked prior to this presentation. I was diagnosed with TP53 mutation 3 years ago. My age is now 59. My kids and father all tested negative for it. I lost my mom when she was 65 to breast cancer. So does that mean that I inherited this from her? She had no idea of this mutation. To the best of my knowledge, was never tested or told. So just wondering, as this is all new to me. So far, no cancer. Praising God for that each day. Thank you for all you do for everyone living with LFS. Looking forward to your presentation.
Let's go through that history one more time.
Okay. This person is diagnosed 3 years ago. Age is 59. Kids and father all tested negative.
Kids and the father are negative. Okay.
Yep. Lost mom to breast cancer when she was 65. Does this mean I inherited this from her?
Okay. Well, again, all these questions, I feel like I'm not giving solid answers. Yes, no, right? If we looked further at the family history and were there other relatives besides the mother, then you could have a stronger answer to that question. So we should back up just for the group, for everyone who's listening live or recording, right? So you can get a p53 mutation in two different ways, or actually multiple ways, but you can inherit it. Someone in your family at one point, that gene became mutated, changed, and then it gets passed along on that side of the family. Or you could be the very first person in your family, no one else has it, and you are the one. You are the index case. You are the original person in the family to develop it. So that means your parents wouldn't have it because you were the first one, and just your kids have it. Or have a risk for it. Now, there's also some unique situations, it's less common, where you could develop a p53 mutation in your ovaries, in your eggs, but not the rest of your body. So you don't have cancer. You don't even get ovarian cancer, or in your sperm. You don't have testicular cancer, but your sperm that you pass on actually have that mutation. And so no one tests positive when you look in the blood because you're not testing the sperm, but it was passed on from your parents. And so there are situations like that. So for this, for this particular person with Li-Fraumeni syndrome, we don't know the answer. Now, breast cancer is one of the more common cancers that women get. So her mother could have just randomly gotten breast cancer at the age of 65, and she could be the first person in her family with Li-Fraumeni syndrome. And We want to know more about how did she find out she had Li-Fraumeni syndrome? Did she actually have cancer? And was she tested and so forth? And so without having her mother's DNA to test, there's really no way to say for sure. That's why I said if her mother's sister also had breast cancer or bone cancer, or there were her grandfather from her mother's side had a brain tumor, one of the Li-Fraumeni cancers at a young age, that would make it much more likely. But without more information, it's tough to answer that question.
Okay. Thomas McCarthy, you actually put a question in the chat. Do you want to ask Dr. Schiffman this question yourself?
Sure. I just was curious in terms of how quickly the science and the research regarding TP53 in elephants is advancing. And is there anything in particular that is needed to move it forward?
Thomas, that's a very relevant question. What's needed is funding. In our lab, this is not the purpose of this call, but in our lab, we're in desperate need of funding to keep this going. So we're working on that, and we're submitting a lot of grants. But it's a very tough time in academics right now to get funding. Probably some of you have heard the NIH is a little bit different than it has been in recent years, and the funding mechanisms are not quite what they used to be. So yes, it is moving forward, but what is helpful is funding to keep it going. So that's certainly I spend, and not just me, right? It's many of my colleagues, but I spend much of my day thinking about how are we going to keep this project going? How are we going to get the funding necessary? And you can imagine, and it takes a certain amount of belief in what we're doing, right? It's not studying elephant p53 is not mainstream, right? I spend a lot of my day trying to convince people and explain why this could have relevance for patients, because it's not necessarily a straight line. So the answer is yes, it's advancing. We have a lot of conversations with biotech. I mentioned Peel as a company is working on this, and there are other collaborators in the biotech space. So I guess the answer is yes, it's moving, it's advancing, but not nearly as fast, Thomas, as I would like it to advance. And so I am always looking for opportunities for partnerships and collaboration so that we can recognize the full potential, right? It's, I really like what Pan said earlier about the study about metformin, which is we don't know. We don't know the outcome of that study, but it's so important to do it so we can know, right? I don't know if elephant p53 is going to be the next best thing for treating cancer. But until I test it, there's no way to ever know it, right? So that's why we do the research to try to answer these questions. We absolutely know it works in elephants. And now my challenge, right, is to figure out how do we make people more like elephants, if we can, and start with treatment and go to prevention. And so the part of the research that actually excites me the most, Thomas, is not, well, it's all of it, of course. Of course, it's all of it. But what's really intriguing is this new discovery I was just mentioning at the end is in the lab, we figured out how is that elephant p53 different? And if we can really spend a lot of time focusing on that, what is that part that's different in the elephant p53 doing to the rest of the cells to trigger such robust cell? It's like night and day between elephant p53 and human p53. And maybe there's already a drug we can take off the shelf that targets some of those downstream pathways that we've never thought about before. But again, all that takes funding, all that takes time, all that takes resources. So we will keep working until there's not a single penny left, and then we'll keep finding more pennies and we'll keep working. So that's the answer to that question.
Great. Thank you very much.
Treva, would you like to ask your question on camera, please?
Sure, but I also wanted to say I'm over here in Oregon, and OHSU just got a huge $2 billion grant from Bill Knight And it's specifically going to the Night Cancer Institute, a lot of it. I work for Legacy, who has a partnership with the Night Cancer Institute. So I don't know, maybe I can connect you to get some funding. I don't know.
We love that. It's all opportunities are good opportunities. We want to work with everyone. If there's someone in the Night Cancer Institute that wants to work together, yes,
I'll
we're
send them
open.
your way.
Yeah, please. I'll put my email in the chat in a minute, but yeah, I'm open to all discussions. We've actually had families raise funding on their own in their, small foundations, and it's a community. There's no question, right? I mean, you guys know this from being part of Living LFS, that we stick together. It's a community. Not everyone knows what LFS is, although it has been on Grey's Anatomy. I'm still
That's
waiting
right.
for it to. I'm still waiting for it to go on the pit, but it will get there. But not a lot of people know about it. But it's actually such an important area to research because it has implications, right? If we can figure out how to help people with Li-Fraumeni syndrome, well, then we can figure out how to help everyone with cancer, right? Because p53 is what drives Li-Fraumeni syndrome, and p53 is what drives the majority of all cancer. So it really is relevant. So it's much more than about elephants. It's about helping everyone with cancer.
My question is really a general question. It's about immunity. And something I heard the other day, and I've been asking a few of the doctors around, but they don't really know what I'm asking. So if you have had chemotherapy any time in your life, so I've had mine a long time ago, 12 years ago, I think now. I heard that you kind of lose your vaccine immunity that you've had even as from childhood, such as the MMR. Is that true? And if so, like measles is making a comeback. So I'm scratching my head over here going, do I go get my titers done? No one has said anything to me. I think from the general public and all the physicians is like, well, you're not doing chemo now, so you have your immunity back. But then I'm like, do I have my immunity still? I don't know.
That is an excellent question. So remember we talked earlier about bone marrow transplant. With bone marrow transplant, absolutely you lose any immunity, right? Because you're getting rid of all of your cells with your immune system. So you're putting in new ones. Now, do the new ones have the same immunity? Maybe yes, maybe no. But for bone marrow transplant, we think a lot about redoing vaccines. So the questions is, with chemotherapy, do we need to get new immunity? And it depends because depends what chemo you got and how much of your immune system got wiped out. So it is actually, and I hadn't really thought about it, but if you think about measles, you do want to make sure that you have the titers. So I would say a good thing is to talk to your oncologist and try to say, you know what, can I check to make sure that my immunity is still intact? Some people it may be, right? Depends how much chemo you got, how long were you immunosuppressed during that chemotherapy. Now you also, this is important, if you're getting vaccines, you need to wait probably, I don't know, 6 months or more before you get those vaccines, because there's no question whether you have immunity or not still intact from original vaccines when you were a kid. Your immune system's ability to respond to a vaccine is much more depressed immediately after chemotherapy. So I would say check titers to make sure that you're okay, but then also make sure if you do need a vaccine, it's been long enough since you've gotten your chemotherapy.
Oh yeah, long time ago.
Yeah.
I just I just have, I guess you learn these things and you forget them, you know.
Yeah, you should be okay, but it's not a bad idea to have the conversation and bring it up. And again, every type of chemo is a little bit different, and how much you got and what your reaction was to it. But it is a very important question. Again, especially now, like you said, with measles making a comeback. That's a great question.
Thank you.
Treva, thank you very much for that question. Now, I'm just going to point out that we've got just a little bit less than a half an hour left, and I know that Dr. Schiffman loves to talk, so I'm going to try and get through the rest of these questions pretty quickly, and I'm going to try and make sure that we get the questions that are the most universal, that are going to help the most people, answered up at the top. So Aria asked me if I could ask these questions on her behalf, so I'm going to put them together. What is the average lifespan of men versus women with the TP53 gene mutation? And then also, if you are not the original carrier of the mutation, is the risk of different kinds of cancer the same? And does the gene become weaker as it's carried through generations?
I'm going to take the second question first.
Okay.
It turns out that we have seen sometimes something called genetic anticipation in some patients, where each subsequent generation, the cancers seem to happen at an earlier age. You may even get more cancers than your previous generation. That doesn't always happen, but it's certainly an observation. We don't totally understand it, but it may be that if you have a p53 mutation, then you're more likely, we know, and this is work that Dr. Malkin did many, many years ago with Uri Tabori, that you can accumulate more copy number variants, which are changes in your genome. And so you can imagine if you don't have that guardian of the genome to keep it, it's like a spell checker, right? And that spell checker is going to let more and more typos pass on by. And the more typos you have, the more likely you may get cancer. So that may explain in some situations why we see younger patients getting cancer with each subsequent generation. That's one.
Dr. Schiffman, is that also this has to do with telomere shortening as well? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Is that something similar?
Yeah. We know that patients with Li-Fraumeni syndrome may have shortened telomeres, but we don't know about, or I don't know, I should say, about the inheritance of shorter telomeres from generation to generation. That's actually an interesting question, but I don't know the answer to that, Greg.
Yeah.
In terms of the average lifespan, and then how that relates to individuals in the family. So this is all so dependent on the work that I was showing, which is why I wanted to share that with you tonight, which is it really depends on the actual variant, right? So it's hard for me to tell you the average lifespan of a man versus a woman with p53 gene, because it depends whether it's a p53 change variant that is more of the sort of attenuated or less cancers, or one of the changes that are more cancers. For the most part, the average lifespan with Li-Fraumeni syndrome, again, it really depends. It depends which cancer and what age you get that cancer, right? Obviously, there's a higher risk of dying from cancer if you have multiple cancers and then they're aggressive cancers. But if you do screening, that can change the outcome. So we're in a transition period, I would say. I think my colleagues would agree with Li-Fraumeni syndrome. It's hard to say, oh, you're only going to live to 65 if you have Li-Fraumeni syndrome. It's really how many cancers are you going to get, and what types of cancers are those? And that's really going to determine it. And it's very hard to say, right? We know some cancers are still, unfortunately, not as treatable as others, and so that will impact it. So it's not
Doctor, can I actually ask a question?
Of course, Hannah.
Hi.
Yes.
Yeah, Hannah. I just lost my husband in November. Here's my question. I had my 6-month son genetically tested, and he came out positive. So can I read the severity of his LFS based on that genetic test? Like, I mean, because in my husband's family, it seems to be very pathogenic, and it's been labeled pathogenic.
Yep.
So is there a code, if you will, on his genetic testing report that would indicate it would be more pathogenic than others?
There's not a code that you can read on the report, but based on what the variant is, you can, there are some variants we know that are more aggressive, more likely to cause more cancers at an earlier age. And that's that work that I was showing before. So
right.
but it's not yet a one-to-one. This is suggestive. Probably the most likely predictor is what's happened before. So if you have a large family or a family that has a large number of people in it with Li-Fraumeni syndrome, you would look to see when did they get their cancers and what cancers did they get. Because there's also, we get this question a lot too, is sort of the genotype phenotype, meaning, all right, is everyone going to get brain cancer in this, or everyone going to get bone cancer? And a lot of that you can see by looking at what's happening in the family. So if you take a family history and you look back, the reason it's very hard to predict, and this is where, I mean, Thomas, you talk about research and where we need to go, right? This is an idea I've had for a while, and we're not there yet, but we're getting there, I think, is, you know, can we plug in all of the factors in some AI machine and spit out a prediction? And so, Hannah, here's the thing. When we talk about your 6-month son, okay, so he got half of his genes from your husband.
From dad, I know
and
all
half
that.
of the genes from you. And
Yes,
so
dad's dead,
some
so
of
it's a brother, and
yeah, so some of your genes may be protective, and may offset some of the p53 genes, which is, again, the challenge here, and I recognize the frustration is
well,
that
because everyone dies in my husband's family. Like everyone dies.
but the question I would have is, at what age and what tumors, and can we use that information? And so, and again, Hannah, if everyone, if this is a p53 variant that's very aggressive, right? And it's what we call high penetrance, meaning everyone seems to get cancer and maybe they get it at a young age. Then that in my mind would mean that, well, maybe we have to be a little bit more aggressive with screening. So if this is a Li-Fraumeni syndrome in your family where it's really on the higher risk side, then maybe that's a situation where instead of every year, we do every 6 months for some type of.
And I'm not gonna take anybody else's time, and I'll just leave it like this. But my husband had a leiomyosarcoma in his IVC, and he had an unbelievably hard surgery, and at the same time, he had a brain tumor.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's tough.
Yeah. So Hannah,
I'm just being like somebody who's really lived this. I mean,
yeah.
Hannah, we have so many people in the community here that we can connect you with. So I just sent you an email. Please reach out, and we'll have you connect with a few people here. And I know it's hard right now.
And Hannah, I put my email in the chat too. So I'm more than happy to talk afterwards or set up a time or whatever.
It's okay.
Yeah, no, but this is important. This is the most important, right? This is why we do this, to try to answer these questions for you and for your family.
Yeah. All right, I'm out.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Hannah. Amber has a question. Amber, did you want to ask your question next?
Yes, I will. Can you hear me? I'm very sick and I've lost my voice.
We can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you, Amber.
Hi. Hannah actually asked one of my questions, so in the same boat with her, where I've lost my husband and his oldest daughter, and we have 2 out of the 3 remaining children who have LFS.
Okay.
So my first question is, my 2 children who have LFS are currently enrolled in the LiftUp study with Dana-Farber in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard you say several times during this meeting about how important it is to have like the blood collected.
Mm-hmm.
I recently received an email from them that they have paused collecting the blood. And I was just wondering if you knew why they were doing that, or is it a funding issue, or is it temporary, or if you even know anything about that?
I don't know off the top of my head. It's probably one of 2 reasons, a funding
Okay.
issue, or they've collected enough blood to complete the study. So there's several different, so there's the Edison study that's collecting blood on patients on a regular basis to try to see if there are any hints in the blood that a tumor is developing before we can see it on a scan.
Okay.
But then there's the LiftUp study, which is a different study, which is more of to try to collect it and classify it, and it's not, as my understanding, is a frequent collection. So
Okay.
it would depend on which specific study, but it's also Amber, is very reasonable to write back and just ask why.
Okay. I
Right?
wasn't sure if those type of questions were like confidential or anything.
No. So the number one thing I always tell people with LFS, and now I will say patients as well, is to advocate for yourself. And we're never going to be upset, or it's never inappropriate to. I mean, these are your children, right? These are your family. This is, in some cases, this is you. You have every single right to ask an investigator, "Hey, what's going on with that study?" And maybe they'll say, well, we haven't analyzed the data yet, or they'll say, well, we've collected everything and now it's going to take us 6 months to look at it. But you should always feel empowered to ask the study coordinator, hey, I'm
Okay.
just wondering, why did it stop?
Okay. My second question is, and I don't want to take up a lot of time, is that recently I read an article out of CHOP where they were successful in, I believe it's like a gene editing type of
Mm-hmm.
program where they were successful in repairing a child who had a, genetic mutation with cancer. It wasn't LFS, but they were able to successfully repair that mutation, and the child is doing very well. Is As the technology and research moves forward, is that something that could potentially be available in the future for our children who have LFS? Or when you were talking about the elephants and the 53 and the blood, is that kind of along the same lines as that, or is that something completely different?
Amber, I'm so glad you asked that question. That is such an important question. The child that you're talking about at CHOP had gene therapy, so Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, had a gene mutation. If I remember correctly, that was in a gene that was in the liver, it's in the gene all in the body, but the protein that was made, or the enzyme that was made, was impacted in the liver. And so it was very easy because they had to, well, I shouldn't use the word easy, but it was straightforward in that they had to replace the gene in the liver, which they did successfully. And again, we should fact check this to make sure I'm remembering correctly. But the challenge with Li-Fraumeni syndrome is the p53 gene that is changed is in every cell in the body. So it's very challenging to replace every single cell in the body. You would have to actually do it when there's only 1 or 2 cells in the body, so that all of the subsequent cells would actually have that change too. So I don't think that gene therapy to replace the changed, mutated, or deleted p53 gene in every single cell in the body is possible. I think it's more likely that we have to get, and we will get better at finding the cancer early, where instead of where it's spread all over, it's just at a very early stage, and then figuring out how to target just those cells that have turned into cancer. Again, the challenge with gene therapy is, like I said, you'd have to replace every single gene, from the genes in your eyes to your hair to your heart to your big toe. And right now, there's not a technique to do that, because every cell that has a p53 gene that's not working right, like in Li-Fraumeni syndrome, that cell, no matter where it is, that's the cell that's at risk for turning into cancer. So you'd have to figure out how to target every single cell in the body. And right now, we just don't have the technology to do that.
Dr. Schiffman, thank you very much for answering that question. For all of these questions, I'm going to take one more. Azalea has raised her hand. She's got her question in the chat. And then we need to get on to make sure that we're respectful of everybody's time that's on this call. So Azalea, do you want to ask your question?
Sure, thank you. It kind of piggybacks off of two questions that were answered earlier. So I have my son with me. He's 12. He's a choroid plexus carcinoma, a papillary carcinoma, and an osteosarcoma. With the surveillance that you were talking about, the Toronto screening protocol, is there something... is this the standard protocol? And for him, we're actually now in between Las Vegas and Utah. But I saw on the adult screening for the abdomen, it said 6 months versus peds. Is this the same for that? Or with a patient that has, my husband and myself came back negative for the genetic gene. So he's the only carrier. But with having these three diagnoses, is he still in that same protocol, surveillance? Is there anything we do different surveillance wise?
Yeah, that's a great question. So certainly for baseline, meaning just for all cancers in general, you would stick to the protocol. And by the way, we're always happy to see you in Utah, right? My email's in the chat. We can work that out. We've got a lot of expertise here. So you would keep doing that protocol. But because there have been other cancers, those cancers, you may have specific screening unrelated to the protocol to make sure that those cancers don't come back early, or if they do come back, that you detect them. And so that would be a little bit different and would be more frequent than just the screening protocol in general. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, no, it does. And thank you for all you do and bringing hope to families like ours. So I'm very grateful to attend this presentation. So thank you.
Listen, I am very grateful to be here. So it's mutual.
I think we're all super grateful to have all of us here. So Dr. Joshua Schiffman, thank you so very much for taking all of this time to be able to answer everybody's questions and to give us some details. And as he mentioned, his email address is in the chat. I also have his contact information and the websites where you can find his work in that resource. If you want that, put your name in the chat. I will send that out after this call. And Dr. Schiffman, you may want to stick around. We're about to start talking about hardship grants, and there is something that actually indirectly relates to you in that regard. Okay. So let's see it. Let's see a show of reactions for Dr. Schiffman here. Thank you so much from all of us for taking the time today. Very cool.
You. Yeah, thank you for having me. And reach out. If I don't know the answer to your question, I will help you find someone who does know.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. So the big thing that we've been talking about all along, of course, is the fact that we offer these LFS hardship grants for families who are struggling with the costs of cancer. We started this program in 2021. And so today we are awarding a huge number of grants, and this is actually a record for us. And actually, we've got news that has come in just since we've started this meeting. We are awarding $88,700 in 61 grants today, for a total of over $375,000 in 336 grants since we started the program in March of 2021. Now, this is the number when I actually made this presentation last night. The Addie Brady Foundation got in touch with us. They donated an additional $5,000 as a last-minute donation. We are going to be able to award 5 more grants today. So our total will actually be today alone, $93,700 in 66 grants. That is a record, and that is thanks to the Living LFS community. Thank you all so much for that. So our deepest gratitude first goes to our anonymous donor who sadly has intense personal experience with the devastation of Li-Fraumeni syndrome and has funded thousands of dollars in grants for American children with LFS every March. And this program would not be the overwhelming success that it is without that person's support. So thanks to this donor, 26 families are receiving support today. Also, Hannah is on this call. Our thanks go to the family and friends of Steve Scanlon, including Hannah. Steve passed late last year at the age of 39 after multiple cancers, and Steve's wife, Steve's family, Steve's friends were kind enough to raise funds at Steve's funeral to donate 2 grants. And that is for $1,850 each for 2 families who specifically are in need of funds to be able to travel for their treatment. Now, Hannah has written something for me to read now. It says, on Steve's niche door at the cemetery, there are 2 photos etched. One of us as a family and one of him and our boys. Under these photos is the phrase, a kind man, an amazing daddy, and a loving husband. This phrase sums up Steve perfectly. He was patient and strong throughout his cancers. His smile was contagious, and we can still hear his laugh echo in our house. He held his boys and myself tightly, and we would do anything to have one of those big Steve daddy hugs again. Steve survived a leiomyosarcoma on his arm and another one in his IVC, but ultimately passed on November 7th of 2025 from glioblastoma. Cancer has taken so many lives in this family. His mother Krista at the age of 36, his Aunt Cindy at 45, his brother Joshua at age 3, his nephew Caleb at age 13. Remaining in our family with LFS are his brother, niece, and our son Noah. LFS is cruel and unrelenting. It is our wish to help those navigate and survive through this. With donations given at Steve's funeral, we are grateful to be able to provide a hardship grant for 2 families. We are lucky to live so close to a nationally recognized hospital system that has LFS adult and pediatric teams, but we realize that other families are not as fortunate. They have long drives to get scans, or perhaps don't have doctors that fully understand the severity of LFS. We wish to provide some financial support for those that travel long distances to see their doctors, as well as other families suffering from the financial burdens of living with LFS and cancer. Steve had a beautiful soul, and his memory will live on in the form of these grants and in the families they help. Hannah and family, thank you so much for making these grants available on behalf of Steve. We appreciate you. We also want to thank Snarky Cancer, who made our shirts possible, and with them raised the funds for 2 grants today. Trish, are you on the call? Can you join us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yay. Yes.
Tell us about Snarky. Tell us about Trey. Tell us about your experiences.
Absolutely. I can talk about Trey all day long. So when we started Living LFS, I'm a founding member in 2014. You know that levity is one of our core values, and dark humor sometimes is what gets us through, right? So we always talked that we needed a whole line of shirts and items and things like that to celebrate us. And when one of our other founding members, Deanna, passed away, it was kind of the kick in the ass I needed to make that dream a reality. And so I went to my husband and I said, I have a crazy idea. I know we both have jobs and we have no experience, but can we start a screen printing company? And he, of course, because he supports everything that I do, and I'm so lucky for that, said yes. And that's how Snarky was born. And so that was 2017. And we do funny shirts, but the biggest thing that we do is we raise money for cancer patients and nonprofits. And I think we have crossed the $300,000 mark of payouts giving back. We have the highest payout of any out there. And then Trey, was a big Trey, who is standing next to me in that picture. It's my son, and he battled sarcomas his whole life. You know, we use cancering as a verb in this community, but he had rhabdo as a toddler. Then he had, between 21 and 31, had leiomyosarcoma, osteosarcoma of the jaw that relapsed on the other side of the jaw. And then the leiomyosarcoma came back and being very, very aggressive. And he passed away in August 17th of 2023. So we still do what we can do to honor that. Trey and I designed port shirts that have no metal in them, and that was our project we did together. You can find out more of that on Snarky as well. But he loved the mutant community. He absolutely really got inspiration from the group and from those of us who live this devastating disease.
Trish, thank you so much.
Yes.
Trish is a founding member of Living LFS, in addition to being the founder of Snarky Cancer, in addition to being a cancer patient herself. Talk about rock stars. Trish is a rock star.
Hey, it takes one to know one.
All right. We also want to thank, like I mentioned, our anonymous donor, the Addie Brady Foundation, family and friends of Steve Scanlon, Snarky Cancer, as well as Kat, Tom Conley, Barbara Mills, Samara, Karen Lingle, Pure Financial Advisors, and donors like you. Your generosity is helping 66 families dealing with the financial realities of LFS to breathe just a little bit easier today. Now, we are at time. It is now here where I am. It's 12:30. We've gone for 2 hours. We have not even gotten to the point of talking about the celebration of the birthday of Living LFS's founder, Jennifer Mallory. Like I said, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. If you can't stay with us, we certainly understand. Thank you very, very much for being here today. Put your name in the chat if you would like that resource sheet. I will send that out right after this meeting. And in the meantime, let's talk about Mallory, born 50 years ago today. Tom, her uncle, was kind enough to send me some pictures of Mallory when she was growing up. So this is what Jennifer Mallory looked like when she was growing up, experiencing some of her holidays and events through her childhood. Here she is with her brother. Tom, can you tell us a little bit about Jen when she was growing up?
Jen was she was a very cute little kid, and Jen was a fairly quiet child next to her brother Bob, and it's it's amusing how life goes, and she grew into such a powerful force. She became very, I think, analytical and very driven to understand the science, and she had such empathy toward the people that really drove her toward playing the role she played in building this group, along with the other founding members. So I'm really, frankly, being involved now myself, I'm just always inspired to see the influence she's had and the positive influence it's had on so many people that are dealing with LFS,
Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
So I've shown you some pictures from Jen as a child, and then these here. This is when she was graduating from high school. This is with her cousin Shannon. Here's Jen with her family. And then we get to more current day. Trish, are you still on the call? Do you want to tell us a little bit about Jen?
Yeah, I love to talk about Jen. Jen was my first super close friend who had LFS. And if Lori Q is on here, she's the first person I got to meet in person with LFS. And she also was super close with Jen. But Jen had this amazing ability to break scientific information down for everybody to understand. And she was the fiercest advocate for the LFS community of anybody I'd ever seen. She really loved each and every person that was a member of the group. And worked on their behalf up until she couldn't work anymore. She was instrumental in the vision that we had as we grew. We're still an all volunteer organization, right?
It's written into our bylaws.
It is.
You have to be a certain kind of person to be a part of Living LFS, and that all came from Jen.
True. Absolutely. And, her dream of family camp, her dream of helping people on the financial side, her dream of welcoming any mutant that felt lost and alone into our community. And I really hope that you guys feel that and take advantage of each other in the best way, right? My closest friends are literally because of this group. And I don't know how I would have survived losing Trey and all the cancering that I've done recently without them. So we are your people, and you will find your close people, even when it seems hopeless. And she taught us that.
Hear, hear.
My husband just said, huzzah.
Huzzah. And this is Jennifer Mills with Jennifer Mallory. This is one of the reasons that we actually say Mills and Mallory instead of calling them Jen. And I think Mills is on the call.
They also have the same middle name. So we couldn't even use full initials. So yeah.
Mills, if you want to say anything, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, we're just happy to share the photos of the three of you two together.
No, I think Trish covered it, but I do want to say that jams rule the world.
They do.
And on the right there, that's me and Mallory. The last time that I saw her with my husband in the back. In the middle is me and Mallory, the first time that I ever met her. And then here's her with our secretary, Inga, as well as down at the bottom, that's Mallory with Linda Zerko and with Irina. So this is as she was involved in the community itself. Then, of course, we have Jen and her family. This is with her husband, Phil. This is the Mallory family, Team Mallory. Thank you very much to Tom for providing these two pictures as well. We're grateful to Mallory for everything she has instilled in us in terms of values as an organization. She started Living LFS with the folks on the left and the folks on the right. That's all current board members still. Here's the very first event, I believe. This was Portland. Is that correct? Portland. And at the bottom is, yep. And here is Family Camp, the very first camp that we had in 2019. As everybody has mentioned, this was her dream, was to be able to put on Family Camp. It finally happened at Camp Make a Dream in Montana in 2019 with the help of her team of co-founders and volunteers. And we're very, very happy to announce that this August, we're hosting our fourth Family Camp. The Jennifer Mallory Camp, this time happening at Camp Corey in Mount Vernon, Washington. Details for that are available in the resource sheet that I will be sending out. Camp is free for attendees. If you decide to attend, all you have to pay for is your transportation to and from camp. Families and individuals with LFS are invited to attend. And again, if you have not had the experience of meeting others with LFS, I would strongly encourage you to make it happen, to be at that family camp in August in Washington State, so that you can meet the rest of us, so that you can meet the folks that are a part of your team. You just don't know it yet. You haven't met us yet. I want to thank everybody so much for attending, for being on this call. Thank you very, very much, Dr. Schiffman. Thank you, Pan. Thank you, Sarah, for participating. Thank you to the other board members for being a part of this. Before we wrap up, does anybody else have any questions or anything else that they would like to say as we wrap up LFS Awareness Day?
I'll just say I'm very grateful to know you, to more who I hope to get to know soon, and for letting me into your lives and into this community.
We're so appreciative.
Absolutely.
Please stay healthy, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
And
you all.
Just so you know, because we knew that Dr. Schiffman needed the most time, I will be putting information about what I learned at the American Psychosocial Oncology Society conference and some exciting things that are happening on the support side of things. I'll be putting a presentation together that I'll share in the group, and we'll also go out in email.
Yes, thank you very much for mentioning that. Sorry that I
Yes.
forgot to mention that. And I do have links for our private support groups on Facebook in that resource sheet that I will be sending out, so that if you're not already a member of a group, I would highly encourage you to join that group on Facebook. It will be very, very helpful for you to be able to meet with and communicate with other people who understand and are in your same experiences. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.